All right, so welcome to the 18th edition of the Autumn Workshop. And my name is Bruno Vagneux, and Stephen Richmond is here with me. We're expecting more people on site, and we have quite a bunch of participants from all over Japan. So we are going to talk today about speaking skills first, testing, specifically testing with Jerry's workshop, and then Stephen and I will be talking about intercultural communication in language classes. But for now, Jerry, you're on, and the title of your workshop was, what was it exactly?
It's a successful conversation test in class and online.
Right.
Can I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
All right. All right. Now let's see if this works. Come on, computer. Does it work? Can you see full screen?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
All right. So shall I begin?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. Greetings. I'm talking into a camera and I can't see anybody. This is really strange.
Okay, but you have lots of smiling people.
Yeah, it's really weird. This is like the first time I've joined a conference like online, through Zoom like this. Like my first hybrid presentation, and it's really weird. But I'll do my best for you guys. I'm here in my office at the University of Toyama, and I'll be talking to you about successful conversation tests in class and online. And so basically my main goal is to talk about testing speaking skills to measure our students' progress and achievement in class. As you know, there are many kinds of tests and for many different skills, but we're going to focus here just in class speaking assessment. All right. So what I'd like to do here overall is to kind of act as a bridge between theory and practice. Now I know, this is Alma. We're all about practice and helping busy teachers, and definitely I'll be leaning towards that side of things. But I also believe that in order to do a better job and more effective job, if you just have a bit of theory, it really, really helps. And so I'd like this presentation to help bridge this gap. All right. So today I'll be looking at 4 basic areas. I'll first cover some key principles for evaluating speaking tests, right? Then after that, I'd like to boil down the process of creating and administrating a speaking test down into 4 manageable steps. It's really tricky, and a lot of teachers don't get involved in speaking tests because, it's just too much to deal with. I'd like to try to make that more simple for you all right? After that, we'll actually take a rubric and just kind of go through it and set it up and then actually practice using it. I've got a recording from a recent speaking test I did with some students. I'll play that for you, and then you can actually practice marking so that all the information I'll give you, you can kind of actually try it out and see how it goes. And then at that point, it would be wonderful to get some discussion going and any questions or opinions, and that way we can get some interaction going, all right? And finally, at the end, since we're here in this COVID era, I'd like to present a speaking test workflow that you can use if you ever have to teach a speaking class online through Zoom or something similar, all right? So moving forward, let's begin. Some key principles. First, washback, the washback effect. No doubt you've heard about this. This is the effect that a test has on teaching and learning. It's really, really a key principle here. And the way I like to remember it is using that kind of pebble in the pond and making ripples metaphor, right? So think of your class as the pond and a test as a rock that you throw into the pond, right? So when you introduce a test into your curriculum, it creates all these ripples and effects, like how you're going to do your job or how the students are going to be studying in the coming week, all right? So this is a key impact, and this impact can cut both ways. So let's take a look here. Now, as you know, here in Japan, it's a test-based educational culture, and English is a subject that's largely taught for the test. And, you know, the Monka show's trying to make it more communicative and everything, but the grammar translation process is still highly prevalent here, and largely students spend their time studying grammar and learning vocabulary, and they have to take these high pressure exams that have one correct answer, right? And that's just the way it is right now in a lot of places. And so what is the impact of that? Well, you end up with a lot of attitudes. A lot of students just don't like English, right? They can't speak it, right? They feel they are not interested in it, or maybe they're too shy, or they're too embarrassed to speak out in front of their classmates, even if they do have ability, right? So for a lot of reasons, you know, tests are really have a bad reputation, all right? And this is a classic case of negative washback, where the tests, especially, for example, the center exams, you know, the entry exams, have a real negative washback on the other aspects of education here, all right? Now, however, what's the solution? Just get rid of all testing? No, of course not, because testing is really important, right? It provides learners with critical feedback on their progress, and it lets you, the teacher, know how everyone's doing, right? If you didn't have an exam, how would you know what you're teaching is taking effect or not, right? Tests also are a point of motivation, right? So students know a test is coming, now they're going to work harder to pass it, hopefully. And, you know, even though it is high pressure, it does give a sense of achievement when students do well, okay? Of course, we also need tests to collect data as part of a student's grade. So for all of these reasons and more, testing is really, really important, and it's not going anywhere, okay? So in this country, especially, testing is such a part of the system that the students are conditioned to focus their efforts on the exam. In other words, if it's not on the test, it's not important. So they put energy into learning what's really needed in order to pass, and they don't have much time for other stuff, which is not an ideal situation, right? You'd like students to want to speak English just for the joy of speaking it. But in reality, you know, they've got a lot of pressure on their time, and they have to just focus on the test, right? So unfortunate as that situation may be, it also presents an opportunity, because we can take advantage of that reality, right, by designing a really good test, all right? And that's what I'll be talking about in this presentation, right? A good test, if you have a really well-designed exam, it gives great meaning and focus to your curriculum, right? It can increase student accountability, help motivate your students, and if you design it well so that you enable them to grow and in measurable ways, it can help really build their confidence, right? So a test is also a great way to provide more personalized feedback to your students. So if you design it right, you'll know exactly what you can say to a student to help them be more clear about what they're doing well and what they need to work on, right? And if students are having trouble in some area, like you're teaching some point or some topic, you know from the test that they're not really getting it, so that means you need to adjust and move forward that way. So it's really, really important to have a good testing system, especially in speaking classes, all right? So the overall goal, I mean, we want to help our students, inspire them to appreciate English, to talk more and to really get with it. So how can we do that? Well, I'm going to argue that one of the best ways and strongest ways is to create a speaking test that promotes positive washback, where the test is actually a tool for encouraging learning and helping students learn, and not some kind of dreaded punishment or anything like that, right? So this is the thing. So how do you do that? Well, there are, besides washback, that's sort of like the overall flow of energy, the impact of a test. So how do you actually evaluate a test one way or another? Well, if you look at the literature on testing, you'll find that there are three main principles involved. You have validity, reliability, and practicality. Now you see I have it in a triangle here. This represents balance. So ideally, you'd like to balance all three of these. That would be your ideal state, all right? So let's go through each of these one by one, and I'll quickly explain it. They're not really, they're deep and profound, but they're really quite easy to grasp, all right? Now, validity, according to Paul Nation in his book, What Should Every EFL Teacher Know?, which you should get. This is an excellent book, all right? A valid test measures what it's supposed to measure, all right? So what does that mean? Well, validity is a key area of research in the field of language testing. There are just books and papers and all kinds of research done on validity. And there are many, many, many kinds of validity, all right? So there's like test validity, convergent validity, content, face, construct, criterion, blah, blah, blah. It goes on, right? So the way I look at it, validity is this sort of gem-like, multifaceted concept. But you know, as a teacher who just wants to help their students learn in class and improve their speaking skill, you don't need to understand all of the facets of a gem to appreciate the beauty of this stone, right? So this is the thing. So it's at once completely complicated and profound, but it's also just simple and beautiful as it is as a whole, okay? So let's take a look through an example what validity is. Okay, let's look at two different kinds of tests, all right? We have in your speaking class, all right, where the goal is to help students improve their speaking skills. Now, which is a more valid test of speaking? The written test or actually having students sit down in front of you and talk? Well, I hope this is obvious. Obviously, the students speaking is more valid because it's actually measuring the ability to speak, right? So if you are wanting to do anything and you want to get better at it and measure your ability at it, you have to do that thing. So if you're a swimmer and you want to improve your swimming, you take a swimming test, right? If you're doing writing or reading, you take writing and reading tests, right? However, if you're speaking, why are we always doing written tests, right? Like this, it just doesn't match. So therefore, it's not a valid measure of speaking. Now, this is not to say that written tests are invalid in general. Of course, they're valid. Even in a speaking class, written tests have their place. Like I do vocabulary quizzes, or maybe you want to test grammar or some kind of writing, dialogue writing thing, right? Writing is really, you know, this type of exam is totally fine, but it's not a measure of one's speaking ability, right? So that's validity, okay? So as J.D. Brown, the noted scholar on language testing, said during his plenary at the JOLT conference in Nagoya 4 years ago, he said, think about this question: am I testing what I think I'm testing? And that's basically it, right? So he went on to say, if you're matching what you're teaching, if your activities and assessments are the same, then you're probably doing valid testing. So that's all that as busy teachers we really need to worry about at this point in terms of validity, okay? Now, reliability, what's that? Well, if a test is given, again, without opportunity for further learning, the students will get about the same score. This is Paul Nation again, all right? So this means what? Well, basically, reliability is all about clarity, transparency, and consistency, right? So these are really, really important factors to determine the quality of an exam, right? How clear is it? How well, so do the students understand the directions, right? Do they know what they're supposed to do? If not, then it's not reliable, right? Do they know what they're going to be tested on, right? Okay, you'll say, all right, we got a speaking test next week. That's it? What are students supposed to do? Right? If they don't know what's going to be on the test, then they can't prepare well, and that makes the test less reliable, right? Is your marking scheme clear and easily understood by the students, right? So if you're going to evaluate their speaking, do they know what you are going to look at? If not, then you have a lot of room for improvement in that area, okay? All right. How about the test in general? Do students take it seriously? Now, if so, then that's great. So all of these factors contribute to the reliability of an exam. And in terms of work and effort that you need to put into creating a test, most of it will come here in this area, okay? All right, so basically, when you boil it all down, reliability is all about fairness. So as J.D. Brown noted, basically what we're talking about is fairness. Am I treating everyone the same? All right, so that's reliability. Okay, finally, practicality. So according to Nation, it's a practical test is easy to make and easy to mark, and it's easy for students to interpret. And of course, you're not spending any money to produce it, or it's not expensive to produce, but not only in terms of money, of course, but time and energy, right? That kind of cost as well. And it fits within the time that you have available, right? So these are all measures of practicality, really, really important, right? We can have the most amazingly, sophisticated exam where you got double blind marking and all kinds of things, and that's great, but if it's going to be impossible to administer in your class of 50 students, then what's the point, right? All right, so let's take a look at back at that example, right? So we know that talking to students directly and having them speak is much more valid and reliable, but it's actually a lot more work, right? You have to take care of a lot of different logistical details, right? And it's not really as easy as a written test where all you have to do is make the questions, hand out the paper, check it, it's all done, okay? So definitely we have two of these concepts. Well, the concepts are kind of at cross purposes here, okay? So balancing them isn't always easy, especially if you have a large class, okay? So, however, so this is a quote that I always I think about. It's again from Paul Nation. When push comes to shove, it's better to emphasize reliability and validity over practicality to the highest degree you are able, right? So what does that mean? Well, I think personally, we want to do our best from the students. So let's take a look at, in terms of energy output, what we're doing here. Okay, so validity. If we have an exam and students are basically talking, then we know we're okay, right? We're good. So validity, that's easy. All right, that's done. Reliability, now that's the tricky part, right? Trying to make our tests as reliable as possible, as fair, clear, consistent as we can. That's what takes work and trial and error and effort, okay? So, and the practicality, right? So how much time do we have to give to this exam? Okay, that's where the tension is, okay? And so my feeling is that when you're thinking about doing speaking tests, there's an element of investment of your time and energy that you need to make at the beginning. But if you stick with it, you can get more towards a balance, right? It becomes easier and easier as you go, right? So if you commit yourself to developing this skill as a teacher to increase your ability to assess spoken language, it definitely does get easier over time as you develop your preferred ways of working, okay? So as Stephen and Bruno wrote in their latest book, all right, this is a key concept to keep in mind, right? The difference between 0 and 1 is infinite. So this is really an important thing to think about when you're imagining doing speaking tests and maybe feeling overwhelmed by the prospect, right? That any little thing that you do is so much better than nothing, okay? It's just really, really important. So, yes, it's going to take more work, but every little bit helps, and every step you take makes it easier and better. And as the results come in, right, as the positive washback flows, you're going to feel this sort of proverbial wind at your back, and you'll want to do more naturally, all right? So this is something to keep in mind. So definitely that's the idea here with the speaking test. What you're really trying to do is create a situation where the test is a key driver of learning, all right, in your classes. Okay, all right, so how do you do it? Well, let's boil it down. I got 4 steps for you, all right? We can just take a look at it one by one, okay? Well, first of all, it is kind of overwhelming because there's so many ideas. There's not only one way to do a speaking test. There are multiple ways, right? There are all kinds of ideas. And if you look at some really good books like these, I recommend, you can definitely find just dozens and dozens of techniques, okay? So Pollination, this one by J.D. Brown is fantastic. It's a collection of 95 different testing ideas. And Underhill's classic book, right, by Cambridge University Press, fantastic. It's got over 60 different ideas, okay? But that can be overwhelming. So what's the first thing? Well, the first question you need to ask yourself is, who is going to do the marking? All right, now you might think, okay, well, I'm the teacher. Of course, that's your job. However, these days there is a lot of interest in the area of peer and self-assessment, right? There's a lot of literature, a lot of information. If you go online, you can find out all kinds of information about it. Maybe some of your colleagues are doing it. This is also an effective way for students to get feedback on their progress, right? So there are a lot of advantages. Let's go through some of them, all right? So if your students are doing peer and self-assessment, they're increasing their self-awareness about what they're good at and what they need to work on, all right? That means they're getting more involved, they're more mentally engaged and taking ownership of their learning, right? So that process, if you do it enough, they're developing their evaluation and judgment skills, right? And these are not only important in the class, but they can apply this ability to other subjects and to the rest of their life, right? For lifelong learning, right? This ability to suss out what's going on, what am I doing well, how can I improve? That's a key skill for life, right? So therefore, it promotes responsibility and independence. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Well, there's more, okay? So in the class, sometimes you get students who are not really into it, right? And they're called like, quote, free riders, right? Well, if you have a vibrant, active system of peer and self-assessment, then that kind of discourages that kind of energy. And students will work harder because they have to perform in front of their peers, right? So this is really a potential area of real growth for everybody, right? And it gives opportunities also for vicarious learning. So as students are evaluating, they're watching their classmates and they can learn from them, right? This is great. So we learn from each other, not only from the teacher. So this is a kind of a cooperative approach that's very attractive. When it's working well, if you've got the system and students know what they're doing, it makes it less work for you even, right? So these are all really exciting ideas, but you know, it's not perfect. There are drawbacks to deal with. So let's examine some of those, okay? Now, what are some of the disadvantages of peer and self-assessment? Well, first, reliability is a big problem, all right? So for example, some students, maybe at the higher levels, are really strict with each other. I've tried this out and I found that some of my best students are really harshly critical. And they're like, whoa, I'm like, no, you actually did pretty good. No. And, you know, on the other hand, some students, they over evaluate themselves. You know, maybe they're not that great, but they gave themselves a higher score, you know. There's also peer pressure or friendships or, you know, or classroom dynamics that come into play, right? So how do I know that a student can mark consistently everyone the same way? Well, depending on who they're marking, it might change, right? So that's an issue to deal with, right? Also, of course, students are students and they don't know about how to mark and evaluate things yet. So that means you've got to take time and effort to train them, all right? So this is a project, right? But I'm just putting this out there as a possibility, right? This is something to consider as you think about your scheme. Of course, it doesn't have to be one way. You can do both, right? Right. So just something to think about. Here's a thing though. If you want to avoid some of the reliability issues with peer and self-assessment, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be a part of a student's official score. So for example, And this quote from Ishihara highlights a key point, that the assessment may not be accurate or impartial, but if but if the evaluative process itself is the point, it can really enhance learning, right? And this is a great idea. So the students are not doing the assessment just to get the score, they're doing it for the act of actually doing it. So therefore, the assessment becomes the pedagogical activity in and of itself, right? So if you add this sort of feedback loop, this sort of assessment to a typical group or pair task, right? This can definitely add to the quality of learning that takes place. Okay, now, next, after that, what do you think about? What can you ask yourself? Well, what marking approach should I adopt, right? So that's a key decision, right? So first of all, right, when you're doing a paper-based test, reliability is not an issue, right? It's totally objective. You've got the questions, there's one answer per question, and it's always the same and it's rock solid. Thing is, with speaking tests, you don't have that, right? Because we're making marks, we're evaluating based on subjective judgments, and that can't ever be totally perfect. So a key point when you're designing a speaking test is just to realize and accept it's never going to be 100% perfect, and you kind of need to make peace with it, all right? So depending on a lot of factors, things can change. I'm reminded of that story, that famous story with the blind wise men. And they were asked to touch an elephant and describe the essence of what an elephant is. And each wise man touched a different aspect of the different part of the elephant, and they all had a totally different perspective, right? So this is kind of how it is in life, and we just have to accept it, right? So that said, so what are basic approaches? What are different paths up that mountain? Well, Underhill writes about three. There's basically three ways to go about it. And one is impression-based marking. Another is additive marking, and then subtractive marking. All right, so let's go through it. What is that? Okay. Well, first of all, when you're looking at impressions and you're trying to evaluate something based on your impression of it, there's kind of two ways to go with it. One is a holistic and the other is analytic. All right, now a holistic impression is when you have all of the criteria that you think are important, that you want to track, you throw them into the pot, and then you just look at someone's performance, and then you kind of all mix it all in together, and you come out with the score. So all of these different things are mixed together, and then you just end up with a quick score. Now, contrast to analytic marking, all right, you have mark each one separately, and then you add it together to reach a final score. All right, so each one has, so you can do it like each one can be equal, or you can weight it. So depending on, importance, okay? So that's also possible, right? So what are the advantages? So if you're looking at a holistic marking system, it's fast and efficient. That's kind of the key thing here, right? So if you've got a large class and you want to mark everyone quickly, this is one way to go, right? It enables more frequent assessment as well, right? This is the kind of assessment I think that was used in a lot of the immediate method approaches, right? So if you're doing in-class testing every week, every lesson, right, this is the way to go, because you just look at someone talk, hunko their progress sheet, and there you go, right? This is a form of holistic marking, okay? Now, what are the disadvantages? Well, some of the drawbacks. What does a mark really mean? Well, you kind of get gives you a general sense, but it's, it doesn't give you really that much more information, right? It can be hard to interpret what it means, right? And also it can be prone to inconsistency, right? So if you're mixing all of these different factors and taking all of them into consideration, how do you know how much one factor is influencing another, right? Maybe you have certain bias towards certain criteria over another. It's hard to be completely consistent, right? Okay. Now, how about analytic marking? Now, here you're creating a powerful diagnostic tool because you're looking at each criteria individually, you're giving direct attention to it. So therefore it becomes a lot easier to understand a performance, different aspects of performance, okay? So that helps you gauge progress and suss out problems. So maybe a student is kind of fluent, but they're using too many Japanese words, or maybe they're using some strategy, but not enough variety of strategy, whatever. It helps you see and understand conversation more deeply, all right? So this raises awareness for students of different sub-skills of conversation, right? And therefore it's conceptually clear. It gives more information to the learners. But there's a but, as usual, it takes more work to administer, as you have to track multiple criteria simultaneously, okay? So also another potential problem is that maybe similar to the holistic one, right? Certain criteria, if they're too close to each other, like if you say, I want to track vocabulary and then I want to track grammar, like what's the difference? What's the difference there? So if criteria are not totally different, then that could be a problem. Also, bias can be a problem. So you have to be careful about that as well. All right. Now, with additive and subtractive marking, this is very similar. You're kind of also, it's similar to impression-based marking. But the thing is, it's a little bit more objective because you're counting or subtracting instances of positive or negative language behavior, right? So this is especially useful when you want to have your students talk about specific content. So every time students mention something, they get a point. Or maybe you want them to practice a particular grammatical structure or some sentence pattern, right? You get points for it, right? Or vocabulary. I use this a lot, this approach, when I'm helping students learn the conversation strategy in conversations in class, right? So every time I hear one of the phrases, then I just check it off, right? So it's very nice. Pronunciation, stress, features of intonation can be tracked this way as well, right? Also, you can look at the number of correct sentences or number of incorrect sentences, right? So subtractive marking is also possible, where if students do something, quote, bad, then they lose the point. My advice, be careful with the subtractive. It's really, really powerful. It's super strong spice. If you add too much, you're going to spoil the soup, right? If you have too much negativity, then you lead to other problems. But a little bit, carefully targeted can work. Okay. All right. So next question: what criteria should I include in my rubric? Okay. Well, this is a key decision that you'll have to make. And I can't tell you. I can just recommend it, right? The thing you got to ask yourself is, what do you want your students to learn? What is it that's important for you as a teacher, right? That's what you have to think about. Decide clear what you want, and then that's how you can design your rubric from there, okay? Just to give you some ideas, right? Underhill talks about traditional accuracy-based criteria such as fluency, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, rhythm, stress, content. That's where you have to produce correct language in some way, right? Now, another idea would be more performance-based criteria. Like you could look at the length of utterances, or maybe how complex the conversation is, or their pace, or their ability to adapt to different situations, or maybe using appropriate style and register, taking initiative, that kind of thing. So these are all ideas, all right? So you have to kind of think about it. What is it that you want? What do your students really need to work on? And then go from there, okay? So whatever you decide, I highly recommend that you don't use technical fancy language on your rubric descriptors, right? Just write it simple in your own voice. And of course, use Japanese if needed, right? So it's really important for clarity and transparency, for reliability's sake, to boost reliability, that your students can really understand clearly what each criteria is all about, okay? If possible, here's another idea for you. Involve your students in making the rubric. Now, of course, you can't do this with every class, but maybe you have a few classes where this might work, right? You can teach about the different criteria and different aspects of conversation. Students could write out some descriptors, then you could edit them and talk about them, and then together you kind of create the rubric, right? That can really increase buy-in and boost overall positive washback, okay? So Tim Murphy did this, and he created a test with his students, and he wrote about his experience. And he said this: if I had made the test alone, I would have tested what I, one person alone, thought was and should have been learned. Together, they taught each other and me much more, and the test was ultimately much more reliable as a mirror of what was actually covered, okay? So notice how he uses the word reliability, right, with student participation. This is, again, an ambitious idea, but I'd like to throw it out there. It's definitely possible, right, if you've got the right situation and the right group. Okay, just to wrap this section up, here are 5 points to remember about creating your rubrics. Choose your criteria carefully. They need to be in line with your overall goals, okay? Make sure each one is conceptually distinct. Otherwise, it's gonna get muddy and it'll be difficult to track accurately, okay? Use simple and clear language on your descriptors. Of course, if you can get a colleague to translate into Japanese, or you can do it yourself, that would also work, okay? So think about also, and we'll come back to this in a bit, how are you going to track each construct or each point live in the moment, right? What are you looking for? What are you listening for, right? That's the key point, right? So you can think of all these things you want to cover, but when you put it all together and you actually are trying to track someone, it might be overwhelming, right? So it's really important that you got to know that there's a learning curve involved here, right? You got to be careful of doing too much. I've seen rubrics from teachers that had like 9 or 10 different criteria. It's like everything they think is important in language learning is all boom right there in one thing, and every single exam has to be this total and complete comprehensive, assessment, and that's just not that important. It's not necessary to go that far, right? It's better to be simple and clear as opposed to overdoing it. Okay, finally, what are some of the logistics that you need to think about? So remember, the test is not just thinking of the rubric and deciding how you want to evaluate it. It's not just creating that feedback mechanism. You also have to think about the actual logistics. This is not something you really need to work on in a written test, and this is part of the initial investment of time and energy that you need. All right, so here are a few things to think about. Okay, first of all, it's a little bit tricky, right? So think about holding a practice test. This can be really, really useful as a review, right? Say you finish a unit in your textbook, okay, and then you're going to hold a practice test next week, and then everyone goes through it and you explain the rubric, you practice it, you go through the movement, whatever needs to be done, the recording, or however you want to do it. And then students know from that exactly what's going on. Give them the rubric, print it out and give it to them so they have it, right? So you've done the job of preparing them as best you can in a low pressure situation, okay? Also, you should record it. You've got this amazing computer now, and the students do too. It's totally simple. When you're recording, just use voice memos and press play or press record, and then you got it, right? You have it. So for every other kind of exam, you have the paper or the essay or whatever. You need to be able to have a similar thing in speaking. This adds to the reliability of the exam. What happens if there's a discrepancy? You think the student did poorly, they think they did well. If you don't have a recording, how can you go back and check it? Also, when you're starting out with evaluating speaking, how are you going to do it only in the class if you've never done it before? How do you know you're doing it right? You need to spend some time listening to the recording so that you develop the ear to pick up all of the things that you want to pick up, right? So key aspect here, and it's easy to do now, okay? All right, next point. So when you have the recording, that also means you don't have to do the marking in class. Now, maybe you want to, maybe that's the ultimate goal, but if you're just getting started, having the ability to do the marking later, like you mark any other exam, is a real advantage, okay? Okay, another idea, another thing to think about is how often do you test? Well, in the old immediate method approach, every week, every class, right? Continual assessment, that's a thing, right? That's one idea, but a lot of teachers find that too much. So how much is right? Well, again, that's a personal decision. I'd recommend at least 2 or 3 times for you as the teacher to do a proper assessment. Maybe once near the beginning, a midterm, and a final, that would be okay. But if you employ, again, the peer and self-assessment, you can then therefore more easily incorporate more frequent assessment, okay? Now, where do you do the assessment? Well, of course, you can do it in your classroom. You can set up a space in front of the room and give everyone something to do, call up students at random, and do the tests, right, like that. Or maybe if your class is too small, maybe have some space in a room nearby. One time I was working in a really tiny classroom and no room to do it. So I set up some chairs outside in the hall, happened to have a nice view. That was cool, right? So you can be a little creative in a pinch. Also, if you have an office, that can work well, all right? So these are various things to think about. Where are you going to do it? Also, pairing. How are you going to pair the students? Well, random would be the way to go. That's the sort of ideal default, I think, because that way students don't know who they're going to talk to. That encourages them to talk to different people, right? And, or, you know, but not every situation that'll work, like, especially if you have a mixed level class, right? So for example, one student is really good, another is sort of a real false beginner. If they talk together, it may not really work because it's just not a good match, right? So therefore, maybe there are certain situations where you need to decide who is going to pair with whom or who should not pair with whom. So if you have some random thing where you're pulling names out of a hat, right? Then make sure that you know ahead of time that Tato and Yumi should not work together, all right? So you'd have to stack the deck in that case. Another issue is, do you notify the students ahead? Like, okay, next week, here's a list of the partners for the test. Think about that. I mean, that could work or not. That there's certain pros and cons to that you can think about, all right? Now, if you do a test in class and you're working with a couple students, right? What are the other students going to do? If you want to keep them productive, you'll need to prepare something for them to do. I like to give sometimes writing tasks. You know, at the CIC, we've got some worksheets. These are the times when I break those out. You know, I give them out and have the students do writing practice while they're waiting. It depends, right? Try to keep them busy and active. That makes your time more productive, all right? Okay, now what I'd like to do, I need a break from talking, all right? So what I'd like to do is a little bit of rubric making and some marking practice. This is the work part of the workshop, all right? So what I've done is I've got a recording of a recent speaking test I did, just 3 minutes with a couple students. And I'd like to take you through the process of making a rubric and then give you a chance to listen and practice using the rubric. So it kind of gives you some more insight into the whole marking process, all right? So let's give it a try. Now, there are all kinds of rubrics. There are so many different formats that you can go with, and I can't cover them all here. I wrote a book on testing. I've talked a whole bunch more about them there. J.D. Brown, if you follow up this reference, it's an excellent source of different types of rubrics. The one that I have come to like the best, and that's what I'll talk to you about today, it's called target level format. This is where you have the criteria on the left, and you just evaluate the performance of that criteria approaches, meets, or exceeds. So in other words, meets is like good, and then exceeds is excellent, and approaches means like needs work, right? And you can listen to the criteria, listen to the performance, and then just quickly check off, right? So this is a nice balance between ease of use and giving a thorough, insight into what the student did, okay? So it's really, really interesting. So this is a way of judging language behaviors based on the student's ability to achieve a certain task. Okay, so here's an example, right? So if you just list the criteria as a statement. So you spoke smoothly with no major breakdowns or long pauses, or your pronunciation was clear and easy to follow, right? So you make a statement and then you just mark it. Did they basically do that? Okay. Or did they really do a great job? That would be exceeds. Or did they really struggle with that point? Maybe approaches, right? So again, it's not super in-depth, but it does give more insight, and it has that balance, nice balance of, you know, kind of the between the holistic and analytic, right? All right, so here's one that I'd like to work on. All right, so I talked about the 3 types of subjective marking. All right, so we have the sort of the impression mark, where you look at something and you just make an impression. Okay, and then another one is the additive marking, where you're listening for something specifically and you're counting instances. All right, and then we have the subtractive marking, which is you're taking away points for something. So I've created a really simple rubric for you guys. So what I'd like you to do is, okay, what I need to do is, Bruno, are you there? Hello, Bruno? Is anybody out there? So what I'd like you guys to do is get some paper, and I'd like you to mark this down, okay? So I'd like you to mark it and just look at fluency, answer length, and using all English. So fluency here, let's define it like you spoke smoothly with few hesitations, no long pauses, and at a comfortable pace. So here I'm defining fluency by the presence of, or the absence of silence. So what you're listening for as you listen to the recording, listen to the silence. Okay, so you're listening to the space between the words. Are the students hesitating a lot? Are there really long pauses like that, right? Are they talking at a comfortable pace? These are all aspects of fluency. Now, of course, there are other ways to define it, but let's go there. It's pretty simple. So you're listening for the silence, the hesitations, the pauses, and the pace. All right, so that's the thing, okay? So what I'd like to do, I don't want to just do it all in one go. Let's do the fluency. Hello? I'm hearing feedback. Okay, anyway, I assume it's working. All right, I can't see anyone, so I'm just gonna trust that it's working. So,
yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so everyone, you got a piece of paper, right? All right, so let's mark it. You're gonna mark, I'm gonna play the recording. I want you to listen to 2 students talking, a man and a woman, in their first year, freshman university students at the University of Toyama, and they are advanced course, so they're pretty good, especially for first years, but it doesn't, anyway, just do your best. Let's listen the first time and just mark for fluency. Listen only for their pace and the hesitation, and listen for any long silences, okay? So we'll do it that first time. Okay, here we go. Gambaro. You guys ready? Hi, please go ahead. Please start.
Hi.
Hi.
The winter is coming. These days I'm so cold.
Yeah. No.
By the way, where are you from?
I'm from Nara.
Nara? Where's that?
I'm from Kashihara City.
Mm-hmm.
It's located in the north part of Nara Prefecture.
Yeah. Okay. I'm from Iwase town. From Toyama. That's north part of Toyama.
Yeah, I know. I went to Iwasehama.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went to Iwasehama by bicycle from Sugitani. It took 2 hours.
I can imagine.
I was very tired.
Yeah, that's so tired. I've been to USA town maybe 100 times, I think. Yeah, that's my hometown. Yeah. I can swim in there, and we can do BBQ, you know. Yeah, that's so fun. Yeah.
Do you do fishing?
No, just swimming, right? Yeah.
I fish.
Mhm.
I went to Iwasehama to fish.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yes. By the way,
Yeah.
what's your major?
My major is economics.
Economics.
Yeah. How about you?
How do you say 医学 in English?
I think maybe wait a minute. Yeah. That's medicine, right?
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah.
I major in medicine.
Oh, that's so smart. You.
Thank you. What year are you in?
I'm a freshman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Me too.
Oh,
I'm
that's
a
good.
freshman
Yeah.
too.
What? Do you join any clubs?
Yeah, I joined 2 clubs.
Ready? What?
First,
Yeah.
handball club.
Handball club?
You know handball?
Yeah, of course.
And second, golf.
Golf?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Very classic, I think. Actually, I'm not interested in any clubs, so yeah. If I love basketball, so
I did basketball club in junior high school.
really, but I love basketball, but I went to the club of basketball, but it is not fun. So yeah.
That's why.
Wait, look at the time. I gotta go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so Dorata. So
Jerry, what would you think about unsharing your screen a little bit so we can yeah.
okay. Let's see if this works here.
I think people who want to speak can unmute their mic and just go ahead. I would have one question to you already, Jerry.
Yeah, sure.
Is how do you manage to test the 2 students separately on this marking sheet that you were showing? Because it's I was more looking for a global impression, and actually personally I was like excellent for the 3 criterias.
Okay. So that's a great point. This is just like a practice rubric, and the actual rubric, you'd have one for each student. So I'd have it on an A4 paper. So I'd have, like, I printed out 2 per A4, and then I cut them in half. Here, you can see, I'm in my office. I can show you. All right. So it looks like this, right? So you print it out, you print out the rubric on 1 A4, okay, and then you cut it in half. And then when the students sit down, you write one student's name here, and you write the other student's name here. And then they're sitting, as they're talking, you're looking at them, and then you're marking each one.
I see.
Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, all right. So what do you guys think? So fluency. So notice that on the rubric, I turned each level into points because I need a point-based system. So you can do that, right? So good job equals 7. Each criteria is 10 points. Okay, excellent score would be 9 or 10. Good job would be 7 or 8, and keep working, less than that. You can use your judgment, right? So obviously they were really good, right? So they were quite good. I would give the score maybe for fluency. My opinion would be a 7 or an 8.
Really?
Okay, yeah, a 7 or 8.
I
Because I noticed there would see, but that's the thing. That's why I want to talk about it, because it's not like, it's an impression, right? So that's the thing, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's not consistent, right? So we have to kind of to talk about this, right? So my feeling is that there was a lot, overall there were no long pauses, but each student spoke a little bit slow. They were very careful and a little bit slow, and there was a lot of hesitations. There were many, many hesitations. And so, yes, so I felt like I'm a Kibishi sensei. Right? I don't like giving super high marks at the beginning. They got to grow somewhere anyway. That's something else to think about, right? So I don't know, maybe 7, maybe 8, right? It depends. You see, it kind of, you know, every teacher will adjust that differently. Any comments? You know, Bruno, you thought 9 or 10?
I would say I would, but I teach French, you know. So for me, if I got this in my class, it would be like wow. But anyway, I mean, they sounded quite good to me. I mean, that's how I would have a conversation with normal person in real life almost.
Okay.
So I would have said 9 for fluency.
Okay. So
But
okay.
Just commenting on what you said, I guess it doesn't matter exactly that we agree on the objective, an objective idea of what is a 9 or what is an 8 or whatever. What is important is that within the class, the teacher has a steady idea of what is a 9 and what is a 9. And the fact that the students understand what is also the teacher's,
Exactly, right? So that's a key point, right? So that's as long as you're consistent with yourself, right? That's the key thing there, I think, right? Okay, so all right, next I want to play it one more time because I want to focus on the, okay, first of all, we can, sorry, come in.
I have a question if that's okay.
Oh, please, sorry.
Thank you. First of all, I'm sorry I didn't say anything at the beginning, but thank you for hosting this conference.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Could you put on your camera if you don't mind?
Yes,
This is being recorded, by the way. I forgot to mention in the beginning.
Okay, one moment.
And everybody's going to be world famous because it's going to be on YouTube.
Okay, so can you see my...
Hi, Kana.
Hello, yes, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. What can
yeah, so it's kind of a practical question about how you grade the fluency category. So do you wait until the end to, you know, decide the number? And if so, do you like count the number of instances?
That's an absolutely great, that's a great question. So there's different ways to do it. So for fluency, I look at fluency as more of an impression thing. I'm not really, I'm kind of counting, it's hard to describe. For me, I'm getting a general overall sense, like I really notice if there's a long pause. I would notice that, right? If there were a really long pause, I would notice that. And this is the notes section, I would make a note of that, okay? So like, but if it's just like tiny little hesitations, maybe I'll check a few, but generally I'm looking at it as my own impression. So I kind of, what I do is I can kind of tell what students are, where they're at, and I give them a preliminary score at the beginning or near the beginning. I can kind of see where they're at because I want to pay attention to other things, right? I'm trying to mark multiple things at the same time. So sometimes you have to kind of listen a bit on one point, give yourself a tentative score, and then listen to something else. So you're not paying, unless you listen to the recording, you know, multiple times, you're not going to be listening completely the whole time for one thing, right? So you sort of get a sense of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, all right. So I do want to play the recording one more time though, because the next one, okay, finally, the all English one, did you guys hear any Japanese? No, of course not. So just they get 10 points, all right? So that's an easy one. So for subtractive marking, that's actually kind of easy to mark in real time because if they don't do something, quote, bad, then they get full points. So there's nothing to really think too much about, right? And if they do say a Japanese, all you have to do is make a tick mark and then count the tick marks. I might even write the sound, like if someone says eto or doshio yabai, I'll just write that down and, you know, whatever they say, I can mark it and then talk to them about it later. So that is that. So let's take care of that. Now I want to focus next on answer length. because this one is a good example of additive marking. And how do you actually track an additive marking approach in real time? Okay, so, all right. So each criteria is 10 points. So what does the student need to do to get the points? Well, here I've defined it as good. To get a good score, a 7 or 8, a student would need at least 5 plus alpha answers. Now, this is connected to conversations in class where one of the golden rules is to give longer, more detailed answers, right? So if a student makes an answer like, okay, if the question is, where are you from? I'm from Toyama. That's all. That's not a plus alpha, you know. I'm from Toyama. It's on the west coast of Japan. Or I'm from Toyama, from a city called Takaoka, right? Now, if they give some extra detail, I'm counting answers that contain an extra detail. So as I listen, I'm listening to when a student makes an answer to a question or a comment, like how often do they make one with an extended extra information in it? So I'll make a mark there. And if they do it, you know, 5 times, they get 7 points. If they do it 6 times, they get 8 points. If they do it 7 times is a 9. If they get 8 or more times, then they'll get 10 points. All right, so that's how an additive approach can work within a rubric like this. All right, so let's listen again. All right, and listen now to the length of the answers. When the student gives an answer, and then make a mark for the man and then for the woman, how often do they give a plus alpha, extra detailed answer? All right, let's give it a try and see if this works. Now, you may not want to do this in your teaching practice, but I just want to use this as an example of practicing the additive marking approach. All right, so here we go. Let's give it a shot. Okay, I got to share my screen again. Okay. All right, and then I'll play this. Okay. All right, so here we go. You guys ready? Hi, please go ahead. Please start.
Hi.
Hi.
The winter is coming. These days are I'm so cold.
Yeah. No.
By the way, where are you from?
I'm from Nara.
Nara? Where's that?
I'm from Kashihara City.
Mm-hmm.
It's located in the north part of Nara Prefecture.
Yeah. Okay. I'm from Iwase town. From Toyama. That's north part of Toyama.
Yeah, I know. I went to Iwasehama.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to Iwasehama by bicycle from Sugitani. It took 2 hours.
I can imagine.
I was very tired.
Yeah, that's so tired. I've been to Iwase town maybe 100 times, I think. Yeah, that's my hometown. Yeah. I can swim in there, and we can do BBQ, you know. Yeah, that's so fun. Yeah.
Do you do fishing?
No, just swimming, right? Yeah.
I fish. I went to Iwasehama to fish.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yes. By the way,
Yeah.
what's your major?
My major is economics. Yeah. How about you?
How do you say igaku in English?
I think maybe wait a minute. Yeah. That's medicine, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I major in medicine.
Oh, that's so smart, you.
Thank you. What year are you in?
I'm a freshman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Me too.
Oh,
I'm
that's
a
good.
freshman
Yeah.
too.
Well, do you join any clubs?
Yeah, I joined 2 clubs.
Really? What?
First,
Yeah.
handball club.
Handball club?
You know handball?
Yeah, of course.
And second, golf.
Golf?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Very classic, I think. Actually, I'm not interested in any clubs, so yeah. I love basketball, so
I did a basketball club in junior high school.
really, but I love basketball, but I went to the club of basketball, but it is not fun. So yeah.
That's why.
Wait, look at the time. I gotta go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So I'll stop the share again. How was that? Dodata? What do you guys think here? Oops.
Is it okay to ask questions?
Of course, Maria, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, you said answer plus alpha, but how do we handle, for example, when there's no question, but someone is spontaneously giving more information, or
yes,
when they cut each other off because they seem nervous? So she's about to give a plus alpha, but he's already asking the question to get more details.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
What do you do there?
Well, I'm keeping track of the turns. So I'm listening to the turn, and I'm imagining like I'm looking at a transcript, right? So I'm visualizing like the turns, and then I'm looking at the answer. So it doesn't have to only be an answer to a question. It can be a comment as well. So if someone asks a question and the person gives a plus alpha answer, and then the other person reacts, and then the other person adds more detail on that, I would count that as a separate thing. You know what I mean? So if there's a turn, if there's a discrete new turn, then and they have some extra detail there, then I would count that. All right. So that's how I look at it. But that's how I look at it, right? So this is something you would have to define. Now, maybe if you had a lower level class, you're not counting specific turns, but just how many clauses. Like if they say, I'm from Toyama, which is near the West Coast, that would be 1 point. It's I live in a town called Takoka, that would be 2 points. You know what I mean? So you could define it different ways. But I'm looking at it here as how many turns do they make that contain extra detailed utterances, you see? So I came up with the guy had 7 and the woman had 6. So how about you guys? So I would give the guy a 10 and the woman a 9, maybe. What do you think? Bruno, anyone?
I counted 3 for the man and
really?
the woman.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So in that case, according to the rubric as they have it, then they would get poor scores. But see, therefore, you may want to adjust those numbers. So that's where the trial and the error comes in. You have to be able, you don't know exactly, like you got to set that base number and you have to have some experience with that. So that's the tricky bit.
Yeah. We are 3 here in the room now, and we all counted the same numbers. 3
really? Interesting.
For him and 4 for her.
I got 6 for the girl. But
sorry.
I think, Joe, what I think with this example that you showed us today, they were both, I mean, I would personally consider making a comment. The guy made lots of comments on what the girl was saying, like, you know, oh, that's smart, or that's cool, or he was.
Yes, that's right.
These are unprompted things. So I would count them as almost the same as plus alpha on the end of an answer.
Okay, sure, why not?
They have the same sort of value.
Yes.
So for giving everything a numerical value, I'd say maybe 1 or 0.5.
Okay.
Those, but I still found the girl was giving more extra information in her responses the guy was giving the basic answer, but then he was giving more question and answer. He was more active that way.
Mm-hmm.
They all seem to be giving more, plus alpha.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Great. Great. So there you go. So that's the thing. So when you're trying to create a rubric to measure the golden rules, all right, this is the kind of thing you need to think about, like to try to come up with a way to track maybe additively a performance like that. Okay. All right. So let me go back. I just got one more section to cover, and then I'll be all done, Bruno. I think we can finish right on time. Okay.
I have a little comment, and
sure.
So I don't want to be speaking all the time apart from you. So anybody, please feel free to switch on your mic and start speaking when you want. But it seems to me that the rubric you gave before, fluency, answer length, and all English, it was possible maybe to count the answer length like we just did. And the other two would be more like a holistic kind of thing, right? Yeah,
it's an impression, right? That's the thing. It's like an impression, right? So that's what I'm trying to show here is that, there's different approaches, right? And that's what you need to decide. Some criteria lend themselves more towards one approach than another, you see? So you can do anything any way you want, but, certain things it's easier. Like if you want to track conversation or vocabulary, certain vocabulary, it's easy just to have a list, and every time you hear it, just check off that word or something like that, right? So there's different ways to do it. Okay, all right, I'm going to share my screen again and kind of wrap this thing up. So that was a practice rubric, all right? So that's just to kind of demonstrate the three types of impressionistic marking, subjective marking that I mentioned earlier. But here's now, can you see, this is an actual rubric that I'm using. I'm using Conversations in Class, right? So this textbook here, all right? And for that, I just quickly run through how I'm going about that, right? So I'm looking at fluency. You're speaking smoothly. I'm interested in my students speaking with a positive, friendly voice. So I'm looking at intonation, okay? So I'm looking at the energy they put out, and I teach students to, talk with some energy, right? I'm looking at conversation strategies, and you can see here, I have them all listed. So anytime I hear them, I memorize them. I know what they are. Whenever I hear one, I just check it. They only need to use a strategy once to get credit. And the idea here is to encourage a variety of strategy use. So the students have to look at the back of the book, at the, at the list of strategies that we have, and they have to actually think about them and use a variety of them, right? You heard in the example, the students said, oh, how do you say nani nani, right? That was directly because of this criteria, right? So anything you put on your rubric, the students will be incentivized to study and do, right? So this was a point I was thinking about. Also, I'm looking at, plus alpha and talking about yourself, right? That's golden rule 3. So I'm listening to how many unprompted comments they make, right? That's golden rule 3. And of course, avoiding Japanese. Again, this is just my thing. It's connected to my curriculum and the textbook I'm using. I trust that you can apply that to your own situation, okay? Okay, now, since we're online, I thought I'd just mention briefly a workflow that you can use if you're teaching classes on Zoom. So I came across this spring, and it works really well, okay? So basically you need two things. You need an online free recorder, okay? Like I use vocaroo.com, which is super simple to use. All you need to do is go to vocaroo.com, press the red button, and then start recording. So it uses your computer's microphone to pick up the sound, okay? So if the students are in pairs or in a small group, the student that has a PC can be the group leader, and the group leader does the recording, okay? If another student has a PC, they can be a backup, but you only need one student per group to do the recording. Then after the recording is done, they can listen to it, they can try it, redo it if they want. Then when they're finally finished, they go to they click the link in the chat in Zoom, and they go to the Google form, which you can see here on the screen, and they fill it out. The group leader fills this out. Like they can put their name, they can put their group number, which I added to keep things organized. Then they write their group members' names. All right, again, keeping things organized. And finally, at the bottom, the most important point is pasting the URL. So with Vocaroo, if you click, it will create a URL to the recording. So the recording is not actually downloaded yet. It's just a URL on their server. So you paste the URL into the Google form and then submit. And then once all the groups are finished, you end up with an auto-generated spreadsheet. So it looks kind of like this. So I had to, erase their names a little bit, but you get the idea, right? So you can see the name of the leader, the other members, and the link to their recording. So this is wonderful, right? If you want, once you click on the link, you can listen to it and make sure it's okay. Then you jump into that group's room and you say, I could hear you guys, it's okay, you're all set. Good luck, take care, goodbye, right? So you need to confirm it with the group before they leave the room. So before the test, I let everyone know, okay, after you submit your form, wait in your room until I check it and make sure it's okay, all right? If there is some problem, I do have the group leader's email. I can follow up that way if needed, right? So it's very simple. And if I want, I can download these files for my own records. You just right-click, download it to your computer, and there you go, okay? So now, after I have the audio, I can then do the marking on my own time using my own rubric. Okay, so that's how that works. This workflow takes a bit of practice, but it can work well. It's solid because the students don't have to do really much of anything. They just have to click a red button, copy a bit of code, and paste it into a form. That's it. And it's pretty simple on the student's end. It's one way. It's not the only way. If the students if they can handle computers and dealing with files, there's other ways to go about it. But I found that this is the most simple and easy way, all right? Okay, so that's an online format. So I would recommend that don't just do this off the bat. You gotta actually incorporate this whole flow into an activity on Zoom. Like maybe for a couple of weeks, just have students practice making recordings in the class and sending it to you so they get used to the entire system. Then when it comes time for the day of the test, they already know the whole process and are familiar with it. So if you do that, it should work okay. If you need a backup, student with an iPhone or a smartphone can also hold up their phone to the computer and then record it, email you the recording that way. Then you have files to deal with, but it's a backup.
Okay. Jerry?
Yeah.
What happens if in a pair both students just have a smartphone, no computer? Is it possible then?
It is possible. It's tricky though, because they have to bounce between screens. In that situation, I would try to move them to a different group, or because I have practiced this already, I would know which students have only a phone, and I would make sure to not put them in a group with another student with only a phone, right? This is part of the preparation. You kind of have to know what kind of equipment your students have. And you know that, okay, these 6 students only have phones or only have iPads. Therefore, they're not going to be recorders. So make sure they're not alone or all together in one group, all right? So try to avoid that situation. If it does come up, then go to the backup plan and just have them record it on their phone, and then text you the recording, and you'll just have to deal with it that way. That's really rare though. If you planned it out right, I think that happened to me once. So it's not trouble if you've worked around it. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, moving on. Let me conclude. So testing, especially speaking testing, is an art. So be creative with it. There's never only one way to go. It's a totally wide open thing. There's different formats, different rubrics. What you choose to assess is totally up to you. So try out different approaches and see what works best for you, okay? Just remember that if you put the time and energy into learning how to assess speaking skills really well, you're going to really do a lot to promote positive washback. Your test will become a learning opportunity in and of itself, right? So it's not just evaluation, it's also pushing the learning, okay? This helps give meaning and focus to your lessons, increases student accountability, and then can boost student confidence and your confidence because you're developing a new skill, right? As you are able to listen to a conversation and then, you know, track multiple things all at once in real time. I mean, you've grown as a teacher. That's pretty empowering, right? So it's definitely worth your time and effort, okay? And as you go through it, you know, work for the balance, right? Remember that validity, as long as your students are speaking, that's done. The hard work comes in making your exams as reliable as possible. So do what you can. You don't have to be perfect and complete at the start. Remember what Stephen and Bruno said, right? You know, 1 is infinitely greater than 0. As you keep naturally going with it, it will become easier and therefore more practical. So you're going to earn your practicality, all right? And then you'll be in this position where you can take this testing culture and you can flip it on its back because students are so focused on the exam and you've developed your skills so well that they're learning, they're like super powerhouses of learning, right? You're become an Aikido master, right? All right, so for more information, check out some of these books. I have them listed in the references. They're all amazing, okay? I've also written a book on this subject that sort of follows generally what I've been talking, except it has a lot more. There's also a Japanese version. It was kindly translated. And finally, if you really want to get into testing, if you really want to follow up on it, there's a great community of folks in Japan and abroad who belong to the testing and evaluation SIG, part of JALT, and they're really fantastic. They have this journal called the Shiken, which you can then get all kinds of great information from. J.D. Brown is is a frequent contributor to this journal, so you're getting like high quality information from here, and it's all free. So check that out. All right, here are my references, and if you'd like a copy of this presentation, or if you have any questions or you want to follow up with anything, here's my email. I'm happy to get in touch. Thank you very much. Yeah. And I will unshare my screen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
We are, what about just giving a few minutes for maybe questions?
Sure. Yeah, we started at 1:10.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're right on time. We got 5 minutes left, actually. So any questions? Anything?
Yes, I do have a question. Oh,
Hi, Kana.
go ahead, Maria.
Please.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So my question is, have you taught this class in both ways? So on the one hand, using speaking tests versus not using speaking tests? And if so, have you noticed any significant differences?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's easy to answer. I never used speaking. I've been teaching since 1993 in Japan. I was an ALT, and then I didn't start doing speaking tests until like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I went the majority of my career without it because I couldn't wrap my head around it. I just couldn't, you know, it's too overwhelming for me. But then finally, little by little, I got into it, and now I'm like a true believer. You know, I'm like, it's so amazing. It's a huge difference.
Okay.
It's totally different because what I do, I have the students record it, and then I have them transcribe their recordings. Now I've got these transcripts, which you can see right here. This is a technique I love to do. I've wrote about this in the book, right? So you've got the transcript, the students are actually looking at, I've got follow-up tasks of studying the transcript. So they're really diving in deep, you know, into what they actually did, you know, and I'm always kind of constantly iterating, and I get new ideas, and I'm always making it, it keeps my head in the game. you know, and I'm much more, I feel much like I'm a much better teacher, and it's just by doing my job better, you know, just doing a basic thing. So that's kind of why I'm all excited about it, because it's made such a big difference for me. And I know that it's a simple, basic thing that other teachers can do. It's not like some special, unique thing. It's like we have to do testing. That's part of our job. So let's do it better.
Okay.
It makes a big difference.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Maria, did you have a question?
Yes. My school puts a big emphasis on speaking and making speeches.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, which is great. I've been struggling with the technical aspect of recording video files.
Oh, okay.
Because they're large.
Yes, they are.
And I'm almost ready to give up. So I've come down to, okay, if you can't get me the video files, we can't do more than 20 megabytes per file in our Moodle system.
Okay.
Then I said, well, just give me the recording and I'll manage to not take off points, although I would prefer a video file to see gestures because they're speeches. I'm wondering if you have considered doing video files as well, if you have recommendations like a video equivalent of Vocaroo, where the students would only be sending a link, a URL, rather than a bulky file.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have considered video, but it is, like you said, it's more technically challenging. And I find though, however, these days, I mean, these are amazing machines and they take fantastic video. So if you can get a, you know, you can get a tripod and you can set something up and you can get students maybe to use their own phones to record it. Maybe then you can find a file transfer system that could work.
There's Flipgrid.
Flipgrid. Ah, yes. Have you heard of Flipgrid, Maria?
I have, and I'm going to research how to maybe use that. That's kind of my first choice now.
Yeah, so
but I haven't tried it.
Finding some kind of like online way of recording so that it's being recorded in the cloud. Like you could do it through Zoom. I mean, you can record to the cloud. So if you have a space, you know, if you have to figure all that technical stuff out, but what you need is a way of recording so that it's not on your Moodle system, it's outside of it, and then a way to transfer the file somewhere to like a Google Drive or OneDrive or some kind of central place. So maybe since students already have a smartphone, they could record their own presentation, and then you could just find a way of transferring the file somewhere.
Yeah,
that would be a suggestion.
Thank you.
I'm not a specialist of Flipgrid, but I've tried it, and it does all of that. It takes care of the recording, of the storing online, of the you can make them visible or not visible. You can give feedback, and everything. All of that is included. So it's a bit the equivalent of Vocaroo in a way, which means that there is only a button to touch. And then after, everything is so easy. So I would recommend trying that.
Thank you.
Good luck, Maria.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, you guys have my email. You know how to get in touch, all right? Talandis@gmail.com. If you want to follow up, if you think of something later, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right on time, Bruno.
So we are going to take a little break. We were planning to take a break at 2:30, but now it's 2:40. So let's just push everything 10 minutes, maybe, or 5 minutes, or what do you think, 5 or 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
This break is good. Push everything 10 minutes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So and we start again in 15 minutes then.
Okay, so
that will be
2:55.
5.
Okay.
2:55, we'll start talking about cultures and cultural differences and kind of topics.
All right, thanks, guys. I'll be right back. Yeah, see you guys soon. Yep.
Yep.